My name is Keitha Dunstan and I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic at Bond University. Bond University is Australia's first private university. We are completely private, so that I guess gives us a very different flavour in what we're trying to achieve with our programs. So we are very student focused and very focused on excellent outcomes for the students and the student experience. So originally I was in the position as Chair of Academic Senate, and we had a paper-based system for managing curriculum and for going through all of the approval processes of Academic Senate. And at the time, in my first year as Chair of Academic Senate, I conducted a audit to make sure we were fully compliant with the AQF requirements. And one of the first things I found is it was very difficult to get the documentation that I needed to even check whether we were fully compliant, let alone really have a good sense of what was going on in the university. So I felt there was quite a sense of urgency to improve our systems. Everything was there, but because it was all paper-based, things were in compactus. Things were, at the time they were approved, they were entered into the student system, but over time various people in the back room of the student system would modify things, and so we potentially had some programs that weren't actually being offered the way that Academic Senate had approved them. So I wanted to have a system that made sure not only that the approval processes were appropriate, but that there was one source of knowledge that we could all rely on, rather than pieces of paper being in different places and, as I said, student systems interpreting pieces of paper and then that getting put into other systems which were then put in different places as well. So overall coordination, improvement of business processes, but from my perspective at that point of time as Chair of Academic Senate is I wanted to make sure that I could be completely sure that we were following all of our quality processes that we had in place. We initially chose Akari. Lauren Hives, who looks after the learning and teaching aspects of ITS for the university, actually, I think it was at a conference, she came across the work that Akari was doing and brought their website to my attention. And I looked at what they had there at that particular point in time, and I thought, well, this is exactly what I want. So it was a demonstration page which showed that you could look at the program and you could see all the subjects in the program, you could look at the subject, you could see the content of the subjects, you could look at the assessments, and I saw the potential for how that could actually map through for a complete assurance of learning. So my probably main motivating was from the Academic Senate compliance point of view, but by that time I was also the Pro-Vice-Chancellor Learning and Teaching, and I got quite excited about the prospects for using this system to actually assure the quality of the learning as well. So an extra dimension to that governance of what we're doing in the learning and teaching space. Managing risk in this space is really important. We, at all universities, need to be fully compliant with Texas standards and so on. So you do need to make sure not only that you I guess design the right processes, but that you actually do have ways of checking and auditing so that you can ensure that you are fully compliant at all points in time. So where you don't have a system that is very easy to check, it is very hard to follow through on that checking of the compliance, and I think that's where the risk comes up. As I said, because our main record of what was happening in the space was what computer type people had put into the system. It was quite opaque to people like me, so it wasn't easy for me to actually check things to ensure things were done the way that they should be done. And obviously that introduces a risk, because that's one of the important parts of academic governance, is that we do have complete transparency of everything that we're doing. Part of me getting everybody on board, which wasn't necessarily easy, but early on, as part of achieving that consensus that we needed to do something, is I promised people that we would start with quite conservative ambition, which I actually literally said, if all that happens is that our current system is now in an electronic system, I will be happy, because at least then I'm not relying on things that are in different filing cabinets in different people's rooms. I can search things, again going back to that risk and that compliance, I can check all of those things, and anything else that we can achieve on top of that is going to be a bonus. And so by having that more conservative ambition for the naysayers, and a particular group that were quite against it initially were the people that were looking after our systems at that particular point in time, because they had to, from their point of view, it's not broken, so why are you fixing it? And it's going to be way too difficult to simplify things the way that you want to have them simplified, because it has to be as complicated as it is. Whereas I'm an accountant by background, so I understand processes, and it didn't need to be anywhere near as complicated as our current paper-based system was. But as we went along and we got to the point where we had basically replaced the paper system with the electronic system, then I think that's when we entered into the phase that we currently are in, where we can be much more ambitious about what we can achieve with the system, and that's when the full assurance of learning aspects of what can happen with the system have been a focus, and others have been focusing on other improvements that we are able to obtain because of having this system. So we've sort of moved from a basic functioning phase into a what could we achieve with this phase, and there's, I think, probably many more things that we haven't thought of yet that we would be able to do because of now having this in an electronic way that can be now integrated across systems, so that we can use the business intelligence in ways that we would like to. I think part of the reason why it was maybe somewhat easier for us to start the journey with Akari was because we were so small, and as part of being small we don't have a lot of resources behind these things, so we hadn't previously invested in systems to try and help with this process. So we were going from a very prehistoric, if you like, paper system into what I'd like to think will become like a Rolls-Royce version of what we can do. For a lot of other universities, I know they have already invested in their own versions of electronic curriculum management systems. So I think for some of them, their challenge is going to be how they modify existing processes to work in a more streamlined fashion with Akari. So for us it was a very obvious big jump in what we were doing. For others it may be more of an incremental change and more of a perhaps using Akari in a way that it better integrates and perhaps with these aspirational things that I was talking about with assurance of learning. So again, other bigger universities I know have invested in processes separately again for assurance of learning, whereas Akari gives us this opportunity to integrate all of this and have it all sitting in one place. So that will be part of their challenge. I think the main thing is what I was talking about before, is whenever you want to go through a change process into a new system, is about taking everyone with you and having them believe in the benefits of the new system that you're going to, because if you have stakeholders that are not on board and they sort of try to sabotage you or try to not help you, then it's not going to be successful. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just a part of change. So we did have almost a year of talking before we actually started doing very much. So I'd suggest that it be thought of that way, as a long-term process where there is a lot of consultation. And I think other universities would probably have the advantage of, if their existing processes are already well developed, then it is maybe a business process improvement process before they actually go into using something like Akari. One of the very obvious benefits that I see right now is Part of our approval processes for improvement of curriculum is that a subcommittee of Academic Senate, which is our program subject review committee, does look at all proposals for new programs or changes to programs or new subjects or significant changes to subjects. Under our old system, because we were so paper bound and 1,000 pages possibly for a meeting. So it was a lot of things to flip through. We were necessarily very involved in process and whether forms had been filled in correctly. Now that we're using Akari and literally rather than filling in a form when a new program is going to be created, what the faculty needs to do is to actually input the program into the system. And then as it goes through its approval processes and is approved, ultimately it is sort of uploaded as an approved program. But we don't have that separate, well, let's put something on paper and then somebody else transfers it from paper onto the computer system. It's actually inputted directly into the computer system. So instead of having the 1,000 pages at the meeting, we have people there with their devices and they are flicking through the actual records in Akari. So it means that tenure of the conversation has become very different. So instead of us having debates about whether field 11C is filled in correctly, we're actually talking about the subject descriptions, we're talking about the program descriptions, we're talking about the program learning outcomes and why they're phrased the way that they are. So we're actually doing the things that we really should have been doing, whereas in the absence of having a system that simplifies the process part, we were stuck in doing a lot of process things. Just another example, the Secretary of Program Subject Review Committee now has much less to do because it is simply the documentation of the agenda and simply forwarding approvals on the things that have been approved. So it's not, again, creation of another set of papers, which is a record of everything that's been approved, is the system now knows what's been approved and we don't have to create a manual record of that. So it's streamlined everything so that we can now worry about the things we should have been worrying about. For the average academic of the university, the main impact that Akari has had on them is that we now have the subject outline process embedded within Akari. So again, just one of the things under our old system is we used to try and keep records of past subject outlines because students go to other universities and they want credit for subjects and so on, so they want to seek those subject outlines. We were largely relying on, again, on paper that's in a filing cabinet somewhere and so on. But now the academics, when they complete their subject outline, that goes directly into the system. And then once that subject outline for that semester is approved, it becomes a permanent record of the subject outline for that semester. So again, it's the encyclopedia or the source of knowledge, if you like, from that. So initially, there was work for academics because they had to go from the old system into this new system. But now that they are in the new system, from semester to semester, all they have to do is deal with any incremental changes that they have made to their subject. So it's not separately creating a new document, which is, this is the new semester's subject outline. It is, well, here was last semester's outline, what do I want to change? And then I upgrade it to the next semester's outline. So again, things are much more streamlined from their point of view. And I think also, similar to what I was saying before about the committee, I think it focuses academics on the right things because now they can see the importance of things like subject learning outcomes and the assessments and the mapping of the assessments to the subject learning outcomes. So I think we always had sound assurance of learning practices going on, but because it was so less subject to scrutiny and transparency, academics may not have been as concerned about the quality of the learning outcomes that they write. because nobody else was going to read them other than themselves and the students. Now, because they know it's all available on the system and that myself and other people on the push of a button can read every single one of them, I think it's focused people's attention on the quality of what they're doing, and I think that's been a very good outcome. I'm very optimistic about how Akari, the system, is actually going to help us with our assurance of learning. We are piloting the assurance of learning in some programs using the system from the beginning of next year, but I hope to have it fully implemented for the whole university by the end of next year or early in 2020. And again, being quite modest about my expectations in the first instance, but what it will be able to do is highlight what all of this looks like. So program learning outcomes have been mapped to subjects, and subject learning outcomes have been mapped to assessments and so on. But up until now, we haven't reported that back to faculties in any summary way, so that when we do have all of this working, we will be able to provide that back to faculties, and they will get to see what it all looks like, all mapped together, and does the jigsaw puzzle actually look like something, or oh my goodness, that's a bit of a mess, that's a bit of a mess. So I'm fully expecting that initially we will continue to drive a lot more change as, again, the light of transparency is shone on some of these things. But once we do have that working, then my expectation is that constructive alignment will just become part of business as usual. Because not surprisingly, while you can train academics to understand what they're doing with assurance of learning processes, if they don't believe that this is actively monitored and that somebody is actually using this for something, they don't necessarily take the task as seriously as you would like them to. Whereas once we can report it all and have it all in black and white and in front of a meeting, it'll suddenly be, oh, look at that person's subject learning outcomes, ha ha ha. So I think it will put some discipline into practice. The ultimate aim is that it's business as usual, and we enter grades into the Blackboard system. But in entering the grades, the way that we enter the grades, it's all structured in the way that we can then do the assurance of learning, by program learning outcome and so on. So we've got a lot of data there that's available for the analytics, and as you say, that can help us with managing the risk and so on, because we can, for example, if there's a program that has maybe a unexpectedly high failure rate in a semester, we would be able to actually look at the student's performance or the program and the student's performance within that program over a period of time to try and identify, well, what is going wrong? Is it particular subjects? Is it part of the design of the program and so on? So it'll give us a lot more opportunity to use data in ways to have a better understanding of the student outcomes.